In this session, we want to explore advanced levels of responding to behavioral challenges. We want to ask ourselves, when there's a child with a significant challenge, two questions. The first is, do I lead with structure or do I need to lead with nurture? Now remember, an underlying principle of trust-based relational intervention is that all our interactions are nurturing. However, there are times when I need to lead with structure. We think of structure and nurture as 2 feet to TBRI. I may start with the first foot as structure, but if I don't lead immediately following with nurture, I will topple. Remember that when a child needs structure and you give them nurture, you impede their ability to grow. But when a child needs nurture and you give them structure, you impede their ability to trust. So this is a very important decision. Do I start with structure or do I start with nurture? A second question we want to always ask ourselves, how high do I set the bar? For some children, the bar is chronically set too low and they never grow. Again, like structure and nurture, for some, the bar is chronically set too high and they can't trust. So as you see, the stakes are high in both situations. Leading with your right amount of structure and nurture, and through that balance, seeing how high to set the bar are critical in all behavioral change, but especially when dealing with high-risk children. Now, we have 2 bars that we experience, that we explore when we set the bar. The first bar is based on what we know of the history of that child. Has that child had trauma, neglect, abuse? Is that child a child who has sensory processing challenges or sensory processing disorder? Is it a child who's been exposed to drugs and or alcohol in utero? And as a side note, in our experiences with high-risk children, the level 4 challenges occur 90% of the time in children who have exposure to substance. They simply have a different brain. I also want to know about the history of the child. For example, have they been to 7 schools this year? Or have they been through 8 foster homes? How fearful is that child, and how much can I expect them to trust me? These are just some of the anchors that we look at when we explore the history of a child. But then we have a second bar. When I first begin working with a child, this historical bar is going to be my first marker. If I, for example, working with a child who I know who's been harmed, abused, I'm going to set the bar low until they trust me. When I can, I will set the bar low. Now, in terms of the current bar, I want to, in the context of their history, set the bar appropriately. What has happened in the last 8 hours? What has happened in the last 2 hours? Some of our children have triggers that are emotional in nature. What has happened in that case in the last 5 minutes? If something was said to a child that they took as mockery or as teasing and they feel shame, I know that for many children who've come from difficult circumstances, that sense of shame will drive them into highly accelerated behaviors. I am going to look not only at anger and fear, shame, sadness. There are many emotional triggers, so those name simply a few. But I also want to look at triggers that we would consider more physical triggers. Has this child had water in the last 2 hours? Has this child had something to eat to stabilize their blood sugar in the last 2 hours? Have they had a sensory activity? And I'm always looking for sensory overload as a driver for behaviors. Has there been a transition in the last few minutes? Transitions, as you know, are very unsettling and can evoke rapid responses out of children when there's a change in the behavior. So what do I know of this child's history, and what do I know about this child today in this moment? Based on that information, I'm going to know how high I can fairly set the bar. Now, I want to set the bar as high as I can fairly, but many times I will set the bar myself at a place that I believe is a fair place, and I will very quickly learn if the child can't get over that bar, that it needs to go lower. Or if the child gets over that bar quite easily, then I might bump it just a tiny bit to see if I can ask for a little bit more. Remember, I want to ask the child to trust me to do their best, to give me what they can give me, but I have to be responsive and flexible as I respond to them. If they can't make my bar, I need to find a bar where they can feel successful, where we can work together to solve whatever challenge has evoked this behavior. As we look at these behaviors and we think about them in the context of, in this case, for this lesson, a case study, I want to talk about two sets of strategies. You've heard us talk about these strategies before. There are proactive strategies that teach a child basic skills they need to know before there's a meltdown. And then there are responsive strategies. Those are the strategies we use when the wheels are coming off or when they appear at risk of coming off. You'll hear us say over and over again, the more we use the proactive strategies, the less we will have to use responsive strategies. But in our work with children, we use both sets, almost like 2 feet again. Proactive in the way that I teach in the home, the classroom, the facility, and then based on the trust that I've built and on the skill that I've helped that child learn, I can manage responsive strategies with more ease and without breaching the connection, the trust, without evoking fear and more maladaptive strategies on the part of the child. For the majority of this lesson and the entirety of a companion lesson that will be part 2 of Advanced Behavioral Change, we'll look at one child, a case study of one child, a beautiful 8-year-old named Taija. This child came to us with reactive behaviors that were explosive and with contrary behaviors that were withdrawn, where she would fold or give up at the drop of a hat. She also came to us with a diagnosis of selective mutism. Her counselor later told us that she'd worked with a child 4 years and that this child had never volunteered a word in any of their sessions, that some words could be painfully drawn out of her, but that she had never spoken on purpose and willfully and purposefully with this professional who's an extraordinary professional. So we knew that she came to us not only with a history of fetal alcohol, but also with a history of trauma, abuse, and neglect before she was adopted into a loving family. Before we begin looking just at that one child and how we might apply responsive strategies in tandem with proactive strategies, I want to show you 2 clips from our trust-based parenting DVD that demonstrate what we call script practice. So as we've mentioned before, we use scripts: listen and obey, speak with respect, with permission and supervision, gentle and kind, and so forth. In this first clip, you will see only the highest risk children, young children under the age of 10, learning in practice during day-to-day operations, listen and obey.
Whoa, where are you going, big boy?
Come back and ask first, please.
I'm going to my buddy.
Asking or telling?
Can I go to my buddy, please?
Oh, yes, you may. That is perfect asking.
You should not have to scream or yell to gain cooperation. Instead, calmly remind your child to listen and obey.
So, Chloe, would you come here and sit beside Miss Karyn, please? Oh, that's good obeying. That was good obeying first time. Listen and obey. How many times does a parent need to say that in a day? What we find is when a parent just can say a child starts off to not do what they're supposed to do and the parent says, listen and obey, the child that has been learning scripts can key on that and immediately stop and regulate.
Has anybody been working on listen and obey? Yeah?
Ultimately, what we want the child to know is when I say something, I mean it. Not when I threaten, but when I ask.
Okay, we need to put the ball up though, because while we're in the group, we don't want to be distracted, right? Attaboy, good obeying. That's a great job.
So listen and obey can replace a lot of negative jargon by a parent, which actually can be demeaning and shaming. When we're doing, don't do that, stop doing that. How many times have I told you not to do that? All day, it's corrosive on the relationship.
Stop. First time, obey.
But listen and obey.
Come back here, please. Good obeying first time. Oh, that was good.
Obey the first time, become much more positive redirections.
When I do this, you walk. When I do that, you stop. Now, you ready?
Playing the game Stop and Go is a fun way to help your child practice the concept of listen and obey.
Ooh, y'all are good. Give me a hand. Okay, Chloe, would you like to have a turn?
In the first example with the beautiful little boy, what you saw was that when I said to this child, can you come here? And he told me what he was going to do. And I said, asking or telling. See, I raised the bar just a little bit. With the second child, a beautiful little child adopted from China, Chloe, I said, come here, would you please come here? And then I did what we call marking the task. I said, good obeying. What we want the children to know is what they did well, and every time we're pleased and we've praised them for that, we encourage them. We are proactive in teaching them to use it again. In the small group where we were doing a nurturing activity, and I asked the young boy sitting beside me, who is a drug and alcohol exposed and abused child prior to his adoption, I asked him to put the ball away. Again, you heard me mark the task. That was good obeying. And then finally, with the little family walking on the sidewalk, we were practicing stop and go, and they were getting to learn in the context of play. In each of these opportunities, I could be playful. In each of these opportunities, by play and joyful interaction, there's a slope again of dopamine, and a slope of dopamine is associated with connection, with pleasure, with joy, with memory, with improved cognition, and with learning. So those are profound gifts. Now, you did see the one child as he started up the ladder, and you may have heard my voice firm up when I said stop, listen and obey, first time. You heard my voice modulate, the bar went up. But you also saw him freeze, and then back down the bar, back down the ladder, and come to me again. I praised him. Good, listening and obeying first time. That is an example of some of the ways that we would teach a script proactively in the context of living, just day-to-day activities. Here's another script that we practice. It's called with permission and supervision. Now, if I practice this again when there's something playful going on, what you can remember is that that child will know that script and can use it later, can call on it later. So here you see a script, one of many that we've talked about, with permission and supervision.
Go. Oh, there you go. Woo-wee. With permission and supervision.
As your child becomes more skillful, you can give him or her the opportunity to do something novel or challenging with permission and supervision.
Okay, do you know what adult supervision means? That means when you bring a grown-up outside with you to do it.
New experiences increase levels of dopamine, which elevates joy.
Look at that. Is that cool?
Yes. Can I do it? Can I do the rest by myself?
Sharing these moments enhances your relationship.
Is that good?
That's pretty good. So now we got to do all these points.
So in this clip, you saw a number of novel activities. Now, obviously, these are things that take time, but they are also things that can be incorporated into the daily activities in a facility, in a school. Some of these may become, for example, art lessons in a residential environment. They may be incorporated into some sort of play activity, or in our circumstances with residential facilities, into a nurture group. But as you saw in these clips, these are also things that can be done day to day. The climbing wall, the sparklers, carving a pumpkin. And one thing that is of importance to note, I believe the last child that you saw carving a pumpkin with his father was a child who had been traditionally exceedingly aggressive and violent, and we had been using many proactive strategies along with responsive strategies to teach him to use his words, and there he was being very, very careful with what could be a dangerous tool. Remember that we're scaffolding the children not only in the skill, but also in their sense of safety. So, for example, if I'm using sparklers with children to teach them permission and supervision, I want to make sure that they know that they're safe. So I'm going to either have my hand with theirs on the sparkler as long as they need me to or ask me to, or I'm going to have my hand on their shoulder and I'm going to be saying, "Sweetie, I'm right here. Tell me if you need more help." So don't enter into novel activities without teaching the amount of skill they need, but more importantly, supporting the potential for the level of fear that they may have. Now let's shift into a case study and begin to look at this beautiful 8-year-old experiences in our work with her. Taija, this first clip is Taija on the second day of camp, and we're working proactively to teach her, her sister, and her mother how to learn new behaviors.
Okay, Mama.
Hi.
The girls and I have been working with their buddies just the last few minutes on mutual storytelling. I love this black one.
Thank you. Mutual storytelling. What is
Yeah, it's like problem solving.
that? Okay.
And so they've talked about several things. Come here, please, darling. Whoa, come on. Come on. You know what? I wouldn't let her just jump on you. I'd make her ask permission, because that'll hurt your back. Okay, now, let me see eyes, girls.
No, no,
So, we've talked about how many things have they figured out they could do in the car? How many things?
We got 2. We got
Okay.
2?
Okay,
Okay.
so they did some storytelling. So what are you going to do in the car instead of fighting?
What?
Oh, I think.
Oh, I know.
What?
Leave your seatbelt on.
Leave your seatbelt on. I like that one.
Leave your seatbelt on is a good
That's
one.
a good one. Okay.
What else were you talking about? You could
Play games.
breathe, play games,
Okay.
use your words,
Listen to music.
show respect to each other, and don't get in each other's space. Now, in the morning, Mama, I want to report on how the girls do going home and coming tomorrow, okay? Now, you know what? I want to hear in the morning if we show respect, okay? Because we're into showing respect.
Can you say yes, ma'am?
All right, darling.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, well, I'll be looking forward to a report in the morning, first thing. All right.
Now with Taisha, what we had done in a previous activity in our camp day was something that we often do with children of all ages, what's called mutual storytelling. So for example, if a child had to go to the doctor, the mother and the child might co-create a story. And the story might begin something like, Dimitri has to go to the doctor's today. Dimitri is very scared. And so the mother might say, Dimitri, tell me what would happen next. And Dimitri, the child, might say, well, you know what? Dimitri was scared, and so he asked his mother if he didn't have to go to the doctor. And then the mother might take back over the story and say, and the mother said, son, I'm sorry, we have to get our shots, but you know what? You can look in my hand, in my eyes, and squeeze my hand. And as soon as we finish that shot, lickety-split, we're going to go get ice cream. Now, what are we going to do right after our shot? And then have the little child play back. We're going to hold hands, I'll look into mommy's eyes, and the second the shot's over, we pay, and we go get ice cream. So that's called mutual storytelling. It's a way to teach children and young people how to solve problems proactively and how to help them actually create a script in their mind so that they have a script that they can go back to. You saw that on the problem solving, we were trying to deal with a problem the two girls had had on the way to camp in the morning that the mother had reported. They had been fighting in the back seat while she was driving 45 minutes in 60 mile an hour traffic. So the plan was going to be that they had made with the buddies that the children would breathe, that they would play a game either together or independently, that they'd use their words and ask for their needs not hit, that they'd show each other respect. Now, showing respect is a good goal, but remember, it's good to operationalize it. So the primary list was operationalized. I'll breathe, I'll play a game, I'll tell my sister what I need. And then I ask for a report in the morning so that in the morning I'd have an opportunity to reinforce. Again, remember, we're reinforcing everything that we do. Now, day 7 with Taija, we'd had an experience with her over and over again. When the adults would say something, she would roll her eyes. Remember, again, if a child has alterations in their brain from chronic stress or trauma, from substance exposure in utero, from extended labor or a difficult prenatal period, they're going to have trouble processing things in an abstract teaching mode. But if we do concrete teaching, in this example, looking into the mirror, we can let her look at herself and see how it looks when she's what we call real girl, the beautiful, precious girl whose eyes light up the world, and to see how it feels if somebody's looking at you and they roll their eyes. So this is day 7, another proactive teaching strategy, doing mirror work.
Me and Tiffany will show you which one it is. Ready? Do you see that? You want to try it? No? Well, yeah, I want you to look at yourself and see what you look like, and we'll do it too, okay? Ready? On 3. 1, 2, 3. Does that hurt your feelings if someone did that to your face? Okay. So let's try not to do that, okay?
We're going to practice nice faces today. Respect with our eyes, and with our voice, and with our body, all right? Is that respect with your eyes?
You want to do a smile face though?
Yeah, what face do we like to see? That one. Let me see. That one. We love that face. So we're going to try to show respect with what?
Faces.
Our face and our eyes and our body, okay?
Awesome, girl. All right, let's go have some fun.
Mirror work is also perfect for children who don't have a sense of themselves. We'll frequently say, darling, I want you to come look in this mirror and see this amazing kid that I'm looking at. And we will have that child stand in the mirror and see externally what they should have seen in a tender, loving parent's eyes when they were tiny. Most kids from hard places did not receive that gift of knowing their preciousness. So to get them to stand in the mirror and say, look at this beautiful child. Look at the smile that lights up the room. Look at these gorgeous eyes. What a tender-hearted, beautiful child this is. So mirror work is a great proactive work. It's a great strategy. And then make note that Dr. Mandy, who's working with her, the camp director, said, what is it now that we're looking for? And she let her play back respect with the eyes, respect with the face. And so remember that anytime we give a chance to say back to us or to model to us, and in this case she did both, deep learning will occur. Now, in this final clip, we will show one other strategy. This is day 18 in camp. This is a game of puppet play. When we work with kids, we'll work with them independently at times, and then we will work with them with their parents at times. Parents have individual training during part of our camp, and then they come to the camp and practice the strategies that we've been teaching them. In this case, we are teaching the parents of Taija proactive strategies, and you will see this final proactive strategy as her daddy practices puppets with her.
All right, Taija, it's time for bed. So go take your bath.
Oh, that was good, no respect.
Taija, it's time to go to bed, so when you take your bath, please.
Coming.
Woohoo!
So you'll see there's a lot of parents there with their children. When we practice with kids, we first let them do the wrong way, or maybe what they would usually do. And when we're doing that, we'll have the children say like, no way, I'm not going to bed. And they'll all go, oh yeah, that was good, no respect. Now let's try respect. Now by giving them a chance to practice the negative way of doing a thing, they feel the difference in the positive way. Also, remember that every child who's watching is learning, because they're learning by watching another child do the script, and then they do the script. One other thing you might notice or might have seen as you looked around the room, many of the children were holding weighted items. So by this point in our camp work, where we've worked with children for a few weeks, they already have a solid grasp on understanding their sensory needs and how that helps them with their behavior. In this example, sitting in a small group for a long period of time while they watch others do script practice. So advanced levels. The take-home messages on advanced levels in this part 1 are, we need to figure out the balance between structure and nurture. We need to ask ourselves, how high can I fairly set the bar so that this child succeeds at their greatest level of capacity? And then we're going to keep in mind proactive and responsive strategies that show respect for the changes in this child's brain, in their ability to trust, in their capacity to process the senses, and in how fragile the body and the emotions are for a child who has come from hard places.